The autumn sun had barely risen when Tamara Johnson's alarm pierced the quiet of her modest Memphis home. She'd been awake long before it rang, rehearsing answers to the scholarship interview questions with Zara in her mind. Her daughter had spent months preparing for this moment, a shot at the prestigious Williams Merit Scholarship that could open doors to any college of the country. "Baby, you ready?" Tamara called up the stairs, adjusting her nurse's scrubs. She'd taken a half-day off work, trading shifts with a colleague to make this morning possible. The scholarship interview was at 8:30 a.m., followed by her shift at noon. Every minute was accounted for in their carefully orchestrated schedule. Zara appeared at the top of the stairs, wearing the navy blazer they'd found at the thrift store last weekend. She'd stayed up late pressing it to perfection, and Tamara felt a surge of pride seeing her daughter looking so professional. At 17, Zara already carried herself with a quiet dignity that reminded Tamara of her own mother. "Got your portfolio?" Tamara asked, grabbing her car keys. Zara nodded, clutching the leather folder containing her achievements. President of the debate club, volunteer work at the local literacy center, and the essay that had gotten her this interview in the first place. They had exactly 45 minutes to make the 20-minute drive across town. The morning traffic moved smoothly until they turned onto Riverside Drive. Tamara noticed the police cruiser in her rearview mirror almost immediately. Her hands instinctively tightened on the steering wheel as she checked her speed, exactly at the limit. The cruiser followed for 3 blocks before the lights flashed. "Not today," Tamara whispered, pulling over. "Please, not today." Zara's reflection in the rearview mirror showed the same tightness around her eyes that Tamara felt in her chest. They'd been here before, 3 times this month alone. Each stop had been for something different. A tail light that wasn't out, failure to signal when she had, and now this. The officer approached slowly, deliberately. Tamara had her license and registration ready before he reached her window. The morning air carried the scent of his coffee as he leaned down. "Do you know why I stopped you, ma'am?" "No, officer, I don't." Tamara fought to keep her voice steady, professional. She was acutely aware of Zara's silent presence beside her, of the scholarship interview slipping further out of reach with each passing minute. "You rolled through that stop sign back there." His flashlight beams swept across her dashboard, then over to Zara. "Sir, I came to a complete stop. I always do, especially with my daughter in the car." The words felt futile even as she spoke them. She glanced at the clock, 8:12 a.m. The next 10 minutes stretched like hours as the officer ran her information. Tamara watched other cars pass freely through the same intersection, including one that definitely didn't stop. Her phone buzzed. A text from the scholarship coordinator. "Confirming 8:30 interview?" When the officer returned, he handed her a citation for $350. "You can contest it in court if you'd like," he said, his tone suggesting the futility of such an attempt. Tamara waited until he drove away before letting out the breath she'd been holding. The clock read 8:25 a.m. "Mom." Zara's voice cracked. "We'll make it," Tamara said, starting the car. But they both knew they wouldn't. Not in time. Not in a way that wouldn't mark Zara as unprofessional or unprepared. Labels that stuck so easily to black candidates, no matter the circumstances. That evening after her shift, Tamara sat at her kitchen table staring at the citation. In her purse was her mother's prescription slip. Refills needed, $320. The scholarship rejection email had arrived during her lunch break. As she calculated the impossible math of her monthly budget, something shifted inside her. This wasn't just about a traffic stop anymore. This was about patterns, about futures being derailed, about dignity being chipped away one citation at a time. Tamara reached for her laptop. It was time to start documenting everything. The fluorescent lights of Friendship Baptist Church's basement cast harsh shadows across the concerned faces of nearly 100 community members. Tamara hadn't planned to speak at the school funding meeting. She'd come to support her neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, whose grandson's advanced math program faced budget cuts. But as she listened to discussions about resource allocation and neighborhood priorities, the weight of her daughter's lost scholarship opportunity pressed against her chest. "The issue isn't just school funding," a voice called out. Tamara recognized Marcus Washington, who owned the barbershop on Elm Street. "It's about how they're bleeding us dry before our kids even get a chance. Can't save for college when you're paying ticket after ticket." The room shifted. Heads nodded. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Before she realized it, Tamara was on her feet. Her heart thundered in her ears as all eyes turned to her. 3 times, she began, her voice shakier than she'd intended. 3 times in 1 month they pulled me over. The last time cost my daughter her scholarship interview. She pulled out her phone, opened her notes app. I've started keeping track. Date, time, officer name, badge number, reason given. And the fines, always just high enough to hurt, but not quite high enough to risk missing work to fight in court. The dam broke. Hands shot up across the room, voices overlapping with similar stories. Dr. Regina Waters, still in her hospital scrubs, stood up near the back. 4 times in the last month, all on my way to emergency room shifts. Never got a ticket in the suburbs where I used to live. My grandson, Mrs. Henderson added, her voice carrying decades of tired anger. Straight A student, saved up for a used car. 2 months of tickets ate through his college fund. Now he's working nights instead of joining that math program. James Carter, a retired veteran who'd served 3 tours, rose slowly from his seat. Yesterday, I was ticketed for suspicious parking in front of my own house. House my family's owned for 40 years. His hands trembled as he spoke. Officer said someone reported a suspicious vehicle. My plates are Veterans Affairs registered. In the back of the room, a young woman in a crisp blazer took rapid notes. Tamara noticed her lean forward when Kevin Foster, a local seminary student, described how mounting fines had forced him to drop out last semester. The woman's business card, passed discreetly after the meeting, identified her as Maya Richardson, civil rights attorney. What you're describing, Maya explained to the small group that lingered afterward, suggests a pattern of targeted enforcement. But we need data, real numbers, not just stories. She looked at Tamara. You mentioned her keeping records? Tamara nodded, pulling up her spreadsheet. 3 weeks of data so far. Names, dates, locations, amounts. Maya's eyes widened as she scrolled through the detailed entries. This is exactly what we need, but more. Much more. She looked around the circle of tired but determined faces. Would you be willing to help gather more evidence? All of you? That night, as Tamara created a shared online document for community members to log their experiences, her phone buzzed with a text from Zara. Mom, is everything okay? You missed dinner. Tamara stared at the growing spreadsheet, at the numbers that represented shattered dreams and empty bank accounts. She thought of Zara's pressed blazer, still hanging in the closet, of Dr. Waters racing to save lives while being treated like a criminal, of Mr. Carter, who'd fought for his country only to be labeled suspicious in front of his own home. No, baby, she typed back. Everything's not okay. But maybe we can finally do something about it. Tamara's dining room had transformed into a makeshift command center, where family photos once hung. Maps now covered the walls, dotted with colored pins marking traffic stops. Red for stops resulting in tickets. Blue for warnings. Yellow for incidents of suspicious activity reports. The pattern was impossible to ignore, a dense cluster of pins in predominantly black neighborhoods, thinning out dramatically in wider areas across town. Mom, you need to see this, Zara called from her laptop. She'd turned her social media savvy into a powerful tool, creating a private Facebook group called Memphis Traffic Truth. In 3 weeks, it had grown to over 500 members. Someone just posted dashcam footage from Riverside Drive. Same officer, same spot, letting white drivers go for the exact same thing he ticketed Mrs. Henderson for. Tamara leaned over her daughter's shoulder, quickly pulling out her phone to document the post before it could disappear. She'd learned that lesson the hard way last week when crucial evidence vanished from social media overnight. Now she backed everything up triple: cloud storage, external hard drive, and printed copies stored at her sister's house across town. The doorbell rang. Both Tamara and Zara froze. It was nearly 9 p.m. Through the peephole, Tamara recognized Officer James Wilson, one of the few black officers on the force and her late brother's former partner. His face was grim. You need to be careful, Tamara, he said quietly after she let him in. They're watching. That photo you took yesterday of Officer Murphy conducting stops. He's filing a harassment complaint. Harassment? Tamara's voice rose. I was across the street on public property. I know, but they're building a case. Just watch your back. He hesitated. And maybe check your brake lights regularly. Make sure they're working. After he left, Tamara found an unmarked envelope in her mailbox. Inside was a single typed page. Stop documenting police activity or face consequences. This is your only warning. Her hands shook as she added the letter to her evidence file, but she refused to let fear stop her. The next morning, she installed security cameras around her house. That afternoon, She photographed 3 more traffic stops, this time using a telephoto lens from inside her car. Maya, their civil rights attorney, arrived for their weekly meeting carrying a stack of documents. The public records request finally came through, she announced, spreading papers across Tamara's pin-marked dining table. Citation data for the past 5 years. We've got them. As they pored over the numbers, the story became clear. Black residents in certain neighborhoods received tickets at 3 times the rate of white residents, often for identical infractions. The fines were consistently higher, payment plans less likely to be offered, and court dates scheduled during working hours. Ms. Johnson. A young voice called from the front door. It was Kevin Foster, the seminary student who had to drop out. I brought you something. He handed her a USB drive. Security footage from my church. It shows the same patrol car circling our block 6 times in 1 hour last Sunday, only pulling over black drivers. Tamara added the drive to their growing evidence wall. Her phone buzzed. Another group member reporting a stop. Then another. And another. Each ping represented another family's struggles, another dream deferred, another bill that couldn't be paid. Mom, Zara said softly, looking at the wall of evidence they'd gathered. They're going to try to stop us, aren't they? Tamara thought of the threatening letter, of Officer Wilson's warning, of the cameras now necessary around her own home. Yes, baby, they probably will. She squared her shoulders. But that's how we know we're onto something real. And we're not stopping until we expose it all. The college application deadline reminder flashed on Tamara's phone as she rushed through the hospital corridor. Another missed meeting with Zara's counselor. 3rd one this month. Her daughter's carefully crafted text. It's fine, Mom. I handled it. Felt like a knife to the heart. Johnson. Got a minute? Dr. Matthews, her supervisor, called from his office. The fluorescent lights cast shadows under his eyes as she entered. Close the door, please. Tamara's scrub still carried the scent of antiseptic from her last patient. She'd pulled a double shift to make up for time spent documenting police stops. Her feet ached, but she stood straight. You're up for the head nurse position, he began, shuffling papers on his desk. Your work is exemplary. Patients love you. But, he paused, choosing his words carefully. There's concern about your external activities. My external activities? The words came out sharper than intended. This lawsuit you're involved in, the social media campaign, it's drawing attention we don't need. He leaned forward. Look, Tamara, I'm on your side. But the board members, they have relationships with city officials. They're worried about hospital funding. The unspoken choice hung in the air, her career or her cause. The promotion would mean an extra $15,000 a year, enough to cover Zara's college application fees, test prep courses, maybe even a starter fund for tuition. That evening, Tamara arrived home to find Zara surrounded by college brochures at the kitchen table. The wall of evidence loomed behind her, a constant reminder of their fight. You missed the financial aid workshop, Zara said quietly, not looking up. Ms. Reynolds said early applications have better chances for scholarships. Baby, I'm sorry, the investigation is more important. I know. Zara's voice cracked. Just like Grandma's protests were more important than your college applications. I found her old arrest records in the attic yesterday. The parallel hit Tamara like a physical blow. Her own mother had missed her high school graduation, arrested during a voting rights demonstration. She'd been so proud then, even through her disappointment. Now here she was, following the same path, creating the same wounds. Her phone buzzed again. Maya needed more documentation for tomorrow's filing. 3 new cases had come in through the Facebook group. The evidence wall had spilled onto a second room. And somewhere in the midst of it all, her daughter's future was slipping through her fingers. I've been accepted to Harrison High's evening program, Zara continued, finally looking up. I can finish senior year at night, work during the day. Help with the bills. No. Tamara's voice shook. Absolutely not. Why not? You can't be everywhere, Mom. Something has to give. Zara gestured at the wall of evidence. All these other people's children matter too, right? Just like I mattered to Grandma, right up until she missed every important moment of your life. The silence that followed was deafening. Tamara looked at her daughter, really looked at her. The tired eyes, the forced maturity, the weight of a struggle she shouldn't have to carry. On the wall behind her, hundreds of pins marked hundreds of stories, each one crying out for justice. But right here, right now, her own story was unraveling. Her phone buzzed again. Maya. Urgent update needed. "Give me a minute," Tamara said, both to her phone and to her daughter. She sat down at the table, pushed aside the evidence files, and pulled Zara's college brochures closer. "Show me what you've found so far. Start with your top choices." The fight for justice could wait one evening. Right now, she needed to be a mother. Maya's heels clicked rapidly across the legal aid office's warm linoleum as she burst through the door, waving a manila envelope. Tamara and 3 other community members looked up from their evidence sorting. "Found it," Maya announced, breathless. "Internal memo from 6 months ago. They're not just targeting randomly, they've got actual quotas. By neighborhood." She spread the documents across the table, pointing to highlighted sections. "Look here. Revenue generation targets by district. They're using fines to fill budget gaps, and guess which neighborhoods they're targeting." Tamara's hands trembled as she read. The numbers were damning, explicit instructions to increase citation rates in predominantly black areas. Her own neighborhood topped the list for enhanced enforcement. "With this," Maya continued, "we can file first thing tomorrow morning. Class action. We're talking major systemic changes, possible criminal investigations into." Tamara's phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something made her step out to take the call. "Mrs. Johnson, this is Dr. Sarah Chen from Mercy Hospital in Atlanta." The voice was warm, professional. "I've been following your advocacy work, and we have a unique opportunity. We're looking for a director of community health initiatives. Double your current salary, full relocation package, housing allowance included." Tamara's heart raced. The numbers Dr. Chen quoted would solve everything. Zara's college tuition, her mother's medical bills, a fresh start away from the mounting tensions. "We need someone with your combination of healthcare experience and community engagement," Dr. Chen continued. "Someone who understands systemic barriers to healthcare access. The position starts next month, but we need an answer by midnight tonight." Back in the office, Maya was outlining their legal strategy when Tamara's phone buzzed again. This time, it was Zara. "Mom, sit down." Her daughter's voice wavered with excitement. "Remember that essay contest I entered? About social justice and family legacy? I won. First prize is a full scholarship to Spelman College." Tamara's joy froze as Zara continued. "But there's a catch. It's tied to their early admission program. I have to accept and move to Atlanta by next month for their special pre-college program. And I have to give them an answer tonight." The universe's cruel timing struck Tamara like a physical blow. Everything they dreamed of, handed to them, just as they were on the verge of breaking open the biggest civil rights case their city had seen in decades. 2 paths diverged before her: security and opportunity in Atlanta, or staying to fight a battle that could help countless families face the same struggles they'd endured. Her phone lit up again. "Maya. Emergency meeting. They know we have the memo. City offering settlement talks, but only if we file within 24 hours. Need your decision ASAP." Tamara stepped to the office window, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of justice and compromise. Across the street, a police cruiser pulled over another black driver. She could almost recite the script that would follow. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory. "Sometimes standing your ground means watching others walk away." But was standing ground worth watching her daughter walk away? "Mrs. Johnson." Dr. Chen's secretary was on the other line. "About the Atlanta position." "Mom," Derek texted. "The scholarship office needs an answer." "Tamara?" Maya called from the conference room. "We need to decide about filing." The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the office in shadows. Tamara looked at the wall of evidence they'd gathered. Hundreds of stories, thousands of dollars in unjust fines, countless dreams deferred or destroyed. Then she looked at her daughter's photo on her phone screen, bright with possibility and promise. She had until midnight to choose between justice and opportunity, between fighting the system and escaping it. The clock struck 7. 5 hours to decide. The red spray paint across Tamara's garage door screamed SNIT in angry letters. She stood in her driveway at dawn. The morning after declining both Atlanta opportunities, her hand clutching her phone so tight her knuckles whitened. She'd barely slept after making her decision, and now this. "Mom." Zara stepped out onto the porch, still in her pajamas. Her sharp intake of breath carried across the quiet morning air. "I'll get the paint remover from the—" A car door slammed down the street, interrupting her. Then another, and another. Mrs. Henderson emerged from her house carrying cleaning supplies. Mr. Carter limped up the sidewalk with a power washer. Dr. Waters pulled up in her scrubs, clearly having just finished a night shift. One by one, neighbors appeared, armed with brushes, soap, and determination. "My grandson saw some guys here around midnight," Mrs. Henderson said, handing Tamara a cup of coffee. "He got pictures. Already sent them to Maya." Kevin Foster, the seminary student, arrived with his entire youth group. "Consider it a practical lesson in community solidarity," he announced, unloading supplies from a church van. As the sun climbed higher, the crowd grew. People Tamara had never met arrived, saying they'd seen posts about the vandalism on the Memphis Traffic Truth page. Local news vans appeared, initially drawing suspicious looks from the cleanup crew until a young black reporter stepped forward. "Mrs. Johnson, I'm Aisha Robinson from Channel 5. But before I'm a reporter, I'm a daughter of this community. My father lost his business last year because of predatory ticketing. Would you be willing to tell your story?" Tamara looked at her freshly cleaned garage door, at the dozens of people now spilling onto her lawn, at Zara organizing younger volunteers into teams. Her daughter caught her eye and nodded. "Actually," Tamara said, "it's not just my story." The impromptu gathering transformed into a powerful testimony session. One by one, community members stepped forward to share their experiences on camera. The young reporter's eyes grew wider with each account. They tried to silence one voice. Mr. Carter said into the microphone, his military bearing proud and straight. Instead, they woke up hundreds. By noon, #DrivingWhileBlack was trending nationally. Cell phone videos of similar experiences flooded social media. Celebrity activists shared Tamara's story. A famous rapper from Memphis posted his own experiences with local police, his millions of followers amplifying the message. Maya arrived with news that made the growing crowd cheer. The vandalism backfired. 4 other civil rights organizations have joined our lawsuit. We're now representing over 3,000 plaintiffs. But it was Zara who delivered the day's most powerful moment. Standing on their porch steps, she addressed the news cameras with a poise that brought tears to Tamara's eyes. "Last night, I turned down a full scholarship," she declared. "People ask me if I regret choosing to stay and fight instead of taking the easy way out. But look around." She gestured to the crowd. "This is what justice looks like. This is what community looks like. Some things are worth more than money. Some fights are bigger than personal gain." As evening approached, the last of the crowd dispersed, leaving Tamara's yard cleaner than it had been in years. Her phone buzzed with a notification. The vandalism story had gone viral, with millions of views and shares. "You know they'll try something else," Zara said quietly as they stood in their doorway. "This isn't over." Tamara watched Mr. Carter park his truck across from their house, settling in for his self-appointed neighborhood watch shift. 2 houses down, Mrs. Henderson's grandson mounted additional security cameras. Dr. Waters had organized a schedule for community patrols. "No, it's not over," Tamara agreed. "But they don't understand what they're up against. They try to isolate us, but instead, they unified us," Zara finished, taking her mother's hand. In the distance, a police siren wailed. But for the first time in months, Tamara didn't flinch. They weren't alone anymore. The courthouse steps teemed with protesters and press as Tamara climbed them, Maya steady beside her. Signs bobbed in the morning air, "Stop predatory policing," and "Justice shouldn't have a price tag." She caught a glimpse of Zara among the supporters, proudly holding her own sign, "My mother's daughter." Inside the courtroom, the city's defense team sat ready, their expensive suits and confident smirks a stark contrast to the community members filling the gallery. Lead attorney Richard Harrison rose, his voice dripping with calculated concern. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, "what we have here is a case built on emotion, not evidence." A few disgruntled citizens turning routine law enforcement into a conspiracy theory. Maya's cross-examinations were surgical. Police data analysts squirmed as she exposed the quota systems. Financial records revealed the direct link between citation revenue and department budgets. But Harrison had saved his most vicious attack for Tamara herself. "Mrs. Johnson," he said, pacing before her on the witness stand, "let's discuss your own history with law enforcement." He held up a stack of papers. 7 parking tickets in college. A dismissed disorderly conduct charge from a protest in 2019. It seemed to have a pattern of disregarding law and order. Tamara felt the trap closing. Everything they built could crumble under the weight of her imperfect past. The gallery held its breath. "Yes," she said quietly. "Let's discuss my history with law enforcement." She reached into her jacket and withdrew a worn photograph. This is my brother, Michael Johnson. Badge number 2247. Her voice strengthened. He died 3 years ago, protecting a domestic violence victim during a confrontation with her abuser. The courtroom stilled. Harrison's smugness faltered. I believe in law and order, Mr. Harrison. I believe in it so much that my only brother gave his life for it. Her voice carried to every corner of the hushed room. But I also believe that justice should be blind. That a badge isn't a license to prey on certain communities. That my daughter shouldn't have to calculate her route to school based on which officers are known to target young black drivers. She looked directly at the jury. Those college parking tickets? I got them rushing between 3 jobs to pay tuition. That protest arrest? I was supporting nurses demanding better patient care ratios. My brother taught me that real law and order means standing up for what's right, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Harrison tried to regain control. And yet you've organized a campaign to undermine police authority. I've organized a campaign to restore police integrity. Tamara interrupted, her calm certainty filling the room. Every officer who abuses their power makes it harder for the good ones. Every quota that targets black neighborhoods destroys the trust my brother died building. You want to talk about my history with law enforcement? Let's talk about how it shaped my understanding of what justice should look like. She pulled out her documentation, 3 years of meticulous records. These aren't just numbers, Mr. Harrison. Each of these citations represents a mother choosing between paying a fine and buying groceries, a student dropping out of college, a dream deferred or destroyed. My brother believed in protecting and serving everyone equally. This case isn't about undermining authority. It's about living up to the badge he wore. The gallery erupted in muffled sobs and whispered amens. Even some jurors wiped away tears. Maya later said she'd never seen a witness testimony change the entire atmosphere of a courtroom so completely. As Tamara stepped down from the stand, she caught Zara's eye in the gallery. Her daughter mouthed the words that gave her strength through every step of this journey. I'm proud of you, Mom. The defense team huddled in urgent whispers. They called for a recess, but everyone in that courtroom knew the tide had turned. Truth had spoken, and not even the most expensive lawyers could silence it now. The settlement terms dominated local headlines. City agrees to historic police reform, millions in fines to be refunded, new oversight board established. But it was the smaller headline in the community section that brought tears to Tamara's eyes. Local mother-daughter duo proves justice has no price tag. Standing at the podium outside the courthouse, Tamara faced a sea of cameras and supporters. The spring sun warmed her face as she unfolded her prepared statement, then deliberately set it aside. 18 months ago, I watched my daughter miss a scholarship interview because of a targeted traffic stop. Today, I watch her help other students apply for the newly established Civil Rights Scholars Program, funded by the very fines that once held our community back. The crowd cheered as she continued, the settlement isn't just about money. It's about transformation. She outlined the changes. Mandatory bias training, elimination of quota systems, community oversight board, body camera requirements. But the victory felt different than she imagined. Later that evening in their living room, now cleared of evidence walls and pin maps, Tamara found Zara surrounded by textbooks. Her daughter looked up with a grin that mirrored her own determination. Got my first law school application essay done, Zara announced. Want to hear it? Already? Baby, you haven't even finished your senior year. Early planning, Mom. You taught me that. Zara's eyes sparkled. The prompt was describe an event that shaped your understanding of justice. Pretty easy choice. As Zara read her essay, Tamara noticed how their story had evolved. It wasn't just about traffic stops anymore. It was about a community finding its voice, about generational wounds beginning to heal, about a mother and daughter learning to fight together instead of drifting apart. Her phone buzzed. An email from the mayor's office. The newly formed Civilian Oversight Board needed a chairperson. The salary matched what she'd been offered in Atlanta. As she read the job description, another email arrived. Her promotion to head nurse had been approved, with back pay for the delayed decision. Mom. Sarah's voice pulled her from the notifications. Remember when you said we had to choose between fighting and leaving? Tamara nodded, thinking of that midnight decision that had seemed so impossible. We didn't just choose to fight, Zara continued. We chose to change things. That's better than escaping them. A knock at the door interrupted them. Maya stood on their porch with a gift bag and a wide smile. Thought you should see this before tomorrow's public announcement. She pulled out a heavy brass plaque. The Michael Johnson Community Oversight Committee. They're naming it after him? Tamara whispered. Your brother's legacy lives on, Maya confirmed. But that's not all. She handed Tamara an envelope. The committee wants you as their first chairperson. Your experience in healthcare, your proven leadership, your ability to bridge communities, you're exactly what they need. That night, long after Maya left, Tamara sat in their quiet living room. The plaque caught the lamplight, her brother's name a promise of change to come. On the coffee table, Zara had left her law school essay open. Justice isn't just about winning cases, she'd written. It's about changing systems, healing communities, and proving that standing your ground doesn't mean standing alone. Tamara touched the words, remembering her own mother's struggles, her brother's sacrifice, her daughter's strength. The price of justice had been high, missed opportunities, threatened careers, countless sleepless nights. But the reward was beyond measure. A legacy of change, a community united, and a daughter who understood that some fights are worth every cost. Tomorrow, she would accept the oversight position. Tomorrow, they would begin the hard work of rebuilding trust between police and community. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles, new opportunities for change. But tonight, in the quiet of victory, Tamara Johnson finally allowed herself to rest, knowing that sometimes the highest price pays the richest rewards.